A New Hope, Nier Chapter 113 Fan Fiction by Azazyel. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel for listening and patreon.com/Azazyel to read all of Azazyel's stories. In the grand theme of things with Salem out of the way via excessive dicking, Remnant had truly become my oyster. Grimm attacks were both high up and completely down in places and driving Ozpin insane. As I had Salem push as much Grimm as she could control at once into the major kingdom's massive city walls. Now granted, most would think what I did was utterly terrible. But for one, literally not a single person got hurt except for the dumbass who went outside after the 10 minutes of air siren warnings of flying Grimm on the way, and thus the vast majority of the weak and stupid Grimm killed themselves trying to climb over or break through massive walls that were more than 30 meters thick. But the Grimm only attacked the kingdom's main city that could actually defend itself, and my Yorha forces used the seemingly endless hordes to send a message to the world via beautiful orbital bombardment via our many orbital satellites that were armed with long-range laser batteries and railguns shooting tungsten rods the size of telephone poles through the heavily armored Grimm with robotic pinpoint accuracy. I literally sat in my dorm room with Ruby in my lap with an Xbox controller in her hands while I wrapped my arms wrapped around the Reaper's waist as we used a satellite that White patched over to our TV to kill Grimm, and in Ruby's own words, what could be a better date than killing baddies with a video game's controller with a weapon that could literally kill us all without issues. Yeah, Ruby's weapon fetish was only growing after seeing Yora's insane weaponry and quick methods of making weaponry with how they were freely thinking machines that just sometimes needed a direction in which to go. Jake, I was talking with 6-0 about your whole bolter Eurojet rounds idea, and I think through a combination with making the round itself out of gravity dust alloyed metal and packing it with a fire dust charge while shooting it out of a railgun, we can solve all the issues with your previous version's chemical charges, speed and penetration issues. Ruby gleefully showed the blueprints, and I shuddered as I fell in love with Ruby a bit then and there. For whatever godforsaken reason, Ruby decided for the rifle prototype she had made in the nanite 3D printer that she was going to have a fucking chainsaw attached to the bottom of the massive rifle. I couldn't help but sniffle as I hugged the 120-pound or 54 kilograms heavy bolter with the Gears of War chainsaw add-on. Hey, Ruby. I spoke up as I held the massive bolter in my arms, and Ruby's eyes gleamed as she giggled at my awestruck expression when I squeezed the large angle trigger on the grip and the chainsaw revved up to life with a guttural roar that gave my manly instincts a metaphorical boner. 2B gave me her sword out of her love. Is this your wedding ring? I asked softly, and Ruby went beet red and choked on nothing but air as she dramatically raised up her arms. But before I could say anything else, she practically merged into a tornado of rose petals as she flew out of the dorm room, leaving the storm of rose petals to fly in the room before almost silent fall to the ground, while I just chuckled at how cute Ruby was. Alright, time to go check in with White, I muttered, taking a breath, and for a moment I considered the logistics of carrying a 100-plus-pound massive gun that was already loaded through the halls of Beacon. Before I remembered, Ruby literally sometimes forgot to put her crescent rose away in her locker and actually slept with the thing. So I just carried the massive rifle through the school grounds, only getting looks that were probably wondering why the hell my gun wasn't in its melee form and thus easier to carry. This was a good point, but at least this version of the bolter couldn't be made into a mecha shift weapon due to the stupidly powerful recoil breaking the mechanisms even with aura filling the weapon. Finally, as I entered Yora's deep underground facility, I made my way over to Commander White, who rolled her eyes seeing me walking over with the large gun wrapped up in both my arms. Dear God, you are going to carry that around for the next couple of days until you drop that on your foot, aren't you? She said sarcastically, and for a moment I wanted to refute her, but honestly, that fit my personality to a honestly. So rather than argue, I just gently leaned the gun on the table in front of White's large couch that she was working from, crawled onto the couch, and then with a soft thud I face-planted into Commander White's thick thighs, making the operator units working in the area giggle at the sight. White, I want some time with you girls before I start scouting out the next world, I spoke muffledly into Commander's white heavenly thighs that were only covered by embroidered thigh highs that attached to the lingerie she wore under her tight-fitting dress. It was only White's android nature that let her make out the words I spoke into her thighs be understood, as no mortal woman would be able to mentally translate the vibrates of my voice against their body into words. White chuckled and her gloved hand threaded through my hair, and I exhaled in comfort as White began giving me a scalp massage before she spoke rather frankly. Besides 9S, who is being Lady Weiss's bodyguard, all your preferred and favorite agents are on site here in Beacon and more than willing to entertain you. Actually, with the babies you have on the way, Popola and Devola especially have been hungry for your touch. White said wryly, and I finally rolled over and could only look up at her breasts hanging over my head before I spoke. That's perfect, but I want this to be special, so like the old days at my bunker back on Earth, could you send a message to the girls to gather for a good old reunion? We could play some Mario Kart again and I will disable the blue shells. I offered and Commander White looked down past her large breasts with a twitching smile before she shook her head. Very well Jake, I will have your androids abandon their posts to come to entertain you HAA. She said with a drawn-out sigh, but I just poked her in the side, making her raise an eyebrow in bemusement, as unlike human lady she wasn't ticklish at all. Grinning I gave White a look full of meaning as I spoke. Yeah, White, what will Yoarha do without you when you are busy entertaining me? It's not like you aren't going to be recording it for literally every android to watch more than 1,000 times each in the course of an hour. I said dryly, and White actually covered her face with the back of her hand to hide her embarrassment at being caught out, and then the operator units called out for me not to stop Commander White from recording any fun we had together. So all in all, bullying my White a bit when she got all prim and stern was too damned fun.